Well, welcome to the Oasis Podcast. My name is John Mark Yoder, and I'm here with Wayne Weaver, and we're here to talk about life. And Wayne, it's really interesting because you are approaching 2 milestones this year in your life. One coming up very shortly is 40 years of ordained ministry, and the other coming up in about a month and a half or so is 70 years of life.
That's right.
It's amazing. And as I was thinking about life and all of the things that we face today, and the fears, the questions, the uncertainties of life as we look forward, and it struck me that 40 years ago, you were looking at the call of God on your life, ordination, those things, maybe not exactly from 40 years from today, but they were in your mind and in your consciousness. God was calling you, and as you were looking ahead from the vantage point of a 29-year-old man, I was thinking maybe today we could talk about what would it look like, maybe even do a couple of episodes. What would you...
Excuse me. I'm going to have to cough a little bit today.
Oh, no worries. What would you, from this stage of life, if you could, what kind of advice would you give to 29-year-old Wayne Weaver from this vantage point? And I'm thinking of the things of several areas that have been very key in ministry and life for you, and those are home and family, church and community, and even business and finance. And I would like if we could perhaps in this episode just talk about what would you speak to 29-year-old Wayne looking at ministry, but about the home and family. Because back then, there's a lot of things competing for your attention. And there's maybe 29-year-olds out here today, or 25-year-olds, or younger or older by a couple of years, men who are looking at the future and saying, how do I prepare? What do I look at? So from a vantage point of 40 years later, looking back, saying, what would have been helpful advice to a young pastor just being ordained, not knowing all of the things that would come against, but to navigate life, especially in regard to family and home?
So, excuse me. I've been kind of sick I'm not anymore, but last weekend-ish and up till about Wednesday. And so I got this cough.
That frog in your throat.
Yeah. And so I have to do some of that, and I really am sorry about that. But let me ask you this. You want me to respond? That should be in 3 categories, of course. Should be family, ministry, and business. Mm-hmm. Which one do you want me to speak about first?
Well, I would like to speak about family.
Family.
Yeah, because I think we're also looking at the fact of, you have a birthday coming up, and that's a very family-oriented thing.
Yeah.
But just as you looked at that as a 29-year-old, starting, you're having children, you're looking at life, and just advice. It's not so much how to do this or that, but what are the fears that you would address, those types of things, and we don't have to go long. We'll do this short, but fine. Just a few of those things, because I want to just start with a couple of verses that I know have been key in your life over the years, and one of those really that started a lot in your ministry is Joel 2:28 to 32, where it says, "It shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions, and also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out my spirit. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire, and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord hath said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call." This was you had experienced the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and you were walking in these things. And you were facing ordination. You were looking at how do I do this? Sons and daughters prophesying, old men dreaming dreams, young men seeing visions. We have a lot of people like that today. But just what does that look like when it plays out in life?
Yeah. Well, so at 29 years old, I would have had maybe about an 8-year-old child. So I didn't have much experience in raising children, and we have a total of 4 children in our household, and then you have this calling on your life that you're aware of, and really nobody, I basically got, well, if I can say this way, as far as in church life, I was ordained, and within a year they asked me to leave the church. And I was out on my own, and it was all based on the doctrine of the baptism of the Holy Spirit. I never felt I could leave a church, which we can talk about this later, unless I'm asked to leave. But, and so as a family, I look at the things now as I look back, and the struggles that, we had in our family. Of course, it was finances, young, being a preacher, being a volunteer preacher. Preachers don't get paid, back in my culture. And not only that, you get asked to have meetings, and they don't pay well at all, because there is this thinking that you should live poor, basically, because, everything that belongs to God has to do with poverty. And in my heart, I knew that was a wrong teaching. And so I had to teach different. But I had to have a job where I could take off and supply the needs of the family. And yet, because I was going around for meetings a lot. I mean, just over and over and over and over and over. And the demand was very strong, and the pay was very poor. And I knew that I had to have some kind of a business or something that I could go away and it would continue to produce income. Well, the business I was in was excavating. And when I went away, that all stopped. And it was back, 40 years ago. And things were different then. So it was trying to find your way to somehow provide for the family. And, I look back, and even though we were very, very poor, literally poor, we made it. And it caused me in the level of being poor, it caused me to make sure that my decisions were correct. I weighed them much more heavier than the typical person would that only has one thing to do. I had many things to do, and so I had to make sure I'm making right decisions, and I made some wrong ones. And as I look back, what advice could I give a 29-year-old man concerning family? One thing that I did, I think that has really helped my family, was I kept them well informed of what was going on.
That's good.
I kept them very well informed in the ministry. When I came back, the people that got saved, the people got set free, I talked about those things. I kept them well informed. I gave them understanding in ministry, how to deal with people that have issues demonically, just all kinds of issues. I did not hide it from them. I always hid from them, and even for the most part, even from my wife, when I was dealing with people that had problems. I didn't, I would advise this 29-year-old to do the same. I felt my wife does not have the same calling that I do, and therefore I don't want to burden her with feeling maybe bad about a situation in church or about two people that couldn't get along with it. I did not want to inform her so that she could go up and honestly look into their face and say, "Hi, how are you doing?" and not know of issues and situations that exist. And I think I would definitely recommend that again. Carry, and that was kind of given me from Wilkerson's, that be sure and carry what God has given you to carry, and let not anyone else be overburdened by it. And I really look at that as really good advice. And it saved our family. It was good. It's a good thing. I didn't have to complain, and I wouldn't come home if I was out during the night dealing with people, didn't come home frustrated and blew off on the table and stuff. I would never do anything like that, nor would I advise that. God has anointed you to carry a certain weight of issues. And it's like I was on the phone just yesterday with someone, and we were talking, and this was a preacher from another area. We were talking, and I said that I could destroy churches because of things I know, of people needing help and they come to me for help, and they came to me for help, or organizations that I could expose. But I said that even if they turn out to be my worst enemy, I could never do that not because of them, because God trusted me with giving them a listening ear to help. And therefore, that has to stay anonymous and can never use it to take somebody down. In the viciousness of what I went through in my life in these 40 years, it was really vicious, in which we can talk about that at some point.
So in that, you were shielding your family from those things. I was. Yeah.
Yes, completely. And but I did keep them informed on how things work. And the other thing is that my family tells me to this day, they never knew that we were poor back then. We shielded them from that. And I know that I always made that the rest have everything they need. I am the last one that needs it. And that is even including food. There's things that I knew that some of them liked. I think my wife was the same way. We would deprive ourselves from things so that the family would have what they need. And in all this, I remember when we made the big investment, where my son's bed, which was only a spring and a mattress on it, that was sitting on concrete blocks. That was the bed. But like my wife did a cover down all the way to the floor, so I don't even know if he ever found out it was cement blocks, that it wasn't a real bed. But then I remember some years later when we changed that was like, felt a sense of accomplishment for me that I could actually
put a bed
for my son. And we were very poor. And most of the studying I did, I had to study right openly in front of people, or my children. And when the children are small, there's a lot of commotion often. And so, but I had to do my studying there. I had
and you
no
were doing
office.
A lot of preaching back then.
Yes, I was. And I didn't have a place or room or anything to study. The house we grew up, that I raised my children in, back in those days, one person came to me and said, I wouldn't raise my pigs in a place that you raise your family. And it kind of broke my heart, because we had no options. We were very poor, and we couldn't afford more. And the renter was very gracious with what he charged. And I tried to be as active and make it a better place. And on the outside, it was a swamp, actually, and we covered it up, and I filled it with dirt and things like this to make it a nice yard. And I tried to improve on those things. And everywhere I always tried to improve. That's one of my callings, is to make things better. So that was, my thing was also
and living that, modeling that in front of the family was very key.
It was, and the children never complained about it. I don't think they knew. I remember, I was 42, about 42 years old, or right 40, when we took our first trip as a family. And then from that point on, we could afford more. And so I was always always tried to take our family on some sort of a trip once a year, or at least every 2 years, if I could. And even though that was looked at in that day as being a very carnal thing, you're just looking out for yourself and you're just living a life of ease to take your family somewhere, that it should almost be torture and it should be hard and should be very difficult. This is that was the common thinking in our day when they would hear that a preacher actually took a trip. And it was for anything different than ministry. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was bad. The other thing that I saw that in the family, I kept a monitor on my family to watch what they can take and watch what they can't take. And I tried to make things better in that way. I would buy them toys that were affordable so that they, a child, whether a child has a small toy or a big toy, is not the problem. It's a toy. Mm-hmm. It's what, So my thing was, I can't afford big toys, so give them just small toys. They have their things. And it's some of those things that I try to always improve on in our home. Finally, what happened is I bought a mini barn, and one of the brothers helped me finish it out to where I had a privacy. That was my study place, and it was away from the house. So that really helped. And now I had a place where at night time I could go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if I'd meet with people, we would meet there. And that really helped. So the whole thing as far as to a family is keep them informed, be wise with what you inform them with, and they're part of you.
And bring them along.
Yeah, bring them along. Yeah, and if you go somewhere, I see this at times. I notice it quite a lot. So I was excavating, and at some point I had a little dump truck, all right? And at times I would take my sons and even my daughters, and I'd take them with me all day long, sitting in the seat in the dump truck or standing next to me on the dozer. Now, today that wouldn't be safe anymore. But the way it was back then, safety was not as big a deal. But, they were kept safe. But they stood right next to me on the dozer, and they, for hours and hours and hours. And I remember that my son, I had a sheep's foot roller that I would start him off, my oldest son, Michael. I was doing chicken houses and grading pads. And so I had a John Deere tractor, kind of a clunker, but I had him stand or sit on the seat, and then I would start the whole thing, and then I'd jump off, and all he'd need to do is steer. And he would go for hours and go around in circles and go around in circles and do the job. And he didn't know how to shift or anything. I just told him that when you have to stop, press this in, but if you can't, turn this key off. And that today would not be safe. But it did a relationship between us. And he liked it, and he was helpful. And this was at a very, very young age. So it's these types of things that I did with my family. I try to take them with me. I see this at times with people that they want to make an errand or something, and their whole family's sitting at home, maybe on iPads and things. No, you take your child with you. Take that child with you, and that's how they learn. Mm-hmm. Common sense is taught by a parent, and I try like everything to make that work. I also saw that I have to develop this in my children so they get the concept of how to figure things out. And at times I would just, you figure it out. And times when they ask questions, well, what is your answer? I think that is really key. So many times we don't want to inspire them with using their head and their brains to do things. It's like, Dad, this and Dad, that. And it's that, well, we answer just, and yes, do that. Yeah, get out of my way. Oh, no, you're going to have a problem later on.
Building that relationship and also encouraging growth.
And I think if you look at my family today, they're thinkers. They can think. They can figure things out. They are mechanically minded, intelligently, mechanically minded. They're not robots. They learned that from somewhere. But there was a time that they were not that way. And I saw that if I can get them, like for instance, my youngest son, Matthew, he was so full of questions, always, Dad this, Dad that, and he couldn't stop talking, just Dad, what about this, Dad, very inquisitive. And at first I would just answer it, and then I saw, no, he's not learning anything. He needs to learn how to figure it out, like I do. I'm figuring this out. What is my approach to it? And so I stimulate that by asking him, well, what do you think? You figure it out. And at one point I had to actually tell him, I remember where it happened. I said, you asked me way too many questions. You need to learn to figure it out before you ask. Think before you ask. Think before you ask. I told every one of them that. You think first, and then you ask. And if you just ask, you're not thinking. So you got to get the thinker working. Think. And there's times when you should answer me stuff that I don't know. That's what I want to hear from you. You tell me things that I don't know. This is what I'm looking for. And that's what I have today. If you look at it, that's what I have today. And it's amazing. In all of them. It's in all of them. You teach your child sense, but you have to teach him that. It does not come natural. No. There is some children that are so inquisitive and they don't want to bother Dad. They'll just go out and they'll figure it out and they'll muffle it through. Yeah, that's okay, but at some point in life you wish that would quit and that would stop because it gets out of control. And we come under the title of those people become rebellious because they did not need Dad when they were young. Dad had no time with them. Now, and I remember when someone told me that, and now at an older age, I don't need Dad. You know, I don't need him anymore. He's in my way. He thinks different. I don't need him. That is a place of challenge in every child's life anyways. But you can really help that by what you and how you model your child to be.
That is so good. Well, we're going to bring this episode to a close. Thank you for those key pieces. I think when you look back and think what you would tell a 29-year-old dad, I think that's huge. And this whole journey and much of what you faced, even as that parent, starting out 40 years ago in ministry. I say starting out, that was ordination. You were ministering before that, but just this whole thing, for others who may be looking at ministry or looking at God's calling in their life and how does my family fit into that, bring them along. I think that is so key. Thank you for joining us. God bless you. Have a good day.